Kia ora koutou, no mai haere mai, and welcome to the Frog Recruitment Auckland Talent webinar. And we're looking at finding a job in Auckland. And if you are looking for work, market conditions are really in your favour at the moment in Tamaki Makaurau. Today, I will run through some of the key factors in the job market in Auckland to help you decide what you want to target. And the team will let you know on some great tips to help you secure the job that you love. We'll have Shavnil Narayan talk about how to stand out from other job seekers. We'll be joined by Julia Yen, our sourcing specialist, making the best first impression that you can. And Kirsty Hennigan, senior consultant, looking at how to prepare for a job interview once you've secured the interview stage. And we will have time, hopefully, to go through some questions at the end. So please type your comments please type your questions in the comments box along the way, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. All right, so starting out, let's look at the Auckland job market. Okay, so for one of the key things that we're looking at, it's mostly good news for job seekers in Auckland. So if we look at across the regions, we found that Auckland was the region with the biggest increase in filled jobs. So they saw a 0.7% increase in filled jobs, which was the greatest region or greatest increase across the regions, compared with the December 2021 quarter. And we saw earnings increase across all industries. So construction was up 14%, looking in all the top three here. So around that 1.6, 1.7 billion mark. Professional, scientific and technical services showed the next increase, up 12%, and healthcare and social assistance up 11%. So we have seen those increases, which is of course good news. But as we'll talk a little bit later on, of course, inflation will play a part in that as well. For unemployment, of course, we know that for New Zealand, we're at record lows, and that's no different for Auckland as well. So in Auckland, the unemployment rate is down to 3.5%, which if you're looking in comparison is down from 5.1 in 2021, and we reached a peak of 7% in 2013. So what does this mean for job seekers? So it means that candidates are in demand. If we're looking through, employers are finding it hard to find good talent. Of course, there's some obvious reasons for this with having gone through the pandemic and restrictions on borders. And now we're also looking at that competition for moving overseas. So it's hard to find that good talent. So if you are looking, it is actually a good time for you to, I guess, to put that pressure on and to be able to look for those opportunities for yourselves as you have a better bargaining position. Now, unfortunately, it's not all good news. So if we look at the wage inflation, so it's good that has increased to 3%, which is the highest level that we've seen since 2009. But the bad news, I guess, is that it isn't quite keeping up with the rampant moves of inflation. So our annual inflation rate, I'm sure you all have heard, has increased to 7.3%, which is over a 30-year high. Some of the biggest movers in that area, so we saw transport contributing to those increased living percent. So the cost of transport, so obviously including petrol, but also things like the prices for new cars, etc. That was up 14%. Housing, so including mortgages, new homes, as well as rental costs, up 9%. And food, as I'm sure you'll all be aware when you go do your grocery shopping, also a big contributor to those pressures on living costs at 6.5%. Okay, so if we look through to, I guess, what we've seen in the market from both from our clients and candidates. So if we look through, we can see here that are organisations planning to recruit? So yes, we have seen a big move. So businesses want to keep things rolling along. And by far the majority were looking to recruit in 2022. So only there was 2% said no, I'm actually going backwards, we're reducing staff numbers, or 11% didn't anticipate hiring. But by far the majority were looking to recruit. Whether or not they can find staff is a different story as well. So again, it puts you in a good position if you are looking for a new job at the moment. And on the flip side of that, if we look to our job seekers, we saw that there was a little bit of movement there. So I think that the big flurry of movement at the end of 2021, so we started to see those effects of the so-called Great Resignation, and there was a lot of movement in the earlier part of this year, but things seem to have stabilized a little bit there. So we had, 38% were either not active but looking soon, or not active and will be looking for a while. So there is still a good bit of movement or looking at those opportunities. We've taught previously where, yes, across the board, we're still waiting to see those wage price index increase to keep up with inflation. But there have been pockets within the industry where they have been able to see some quite high increases in salaries and wages. Okay, so what are those jobs that are in demand? So if we go to our next slide there, look at some of the jobs that we've seen on the ground level here with Frog Recruitment. So some of the top areas that we're looking at, so the key specializations in demand or with the most movement of jobs so far this year has been within business support, government positions, so that's always going to keep ticking along, as well as supply chain management and human resources. So a range of different roles there, through from administration, customer service, your support roles. A lot of these are transactional roles to keep the business going, so your distribution officer, inventory controller, as well as some specialist roles, particularly within HR. So as we've been looking for staff for our team as well, a lot of businesses have been looking to fill that space within their recruitment or talent acquisition teams. So of course, being able to find new talent has been the biggest challenge for businesses this year. So those specialist roles have really been in demand for 2022 and expect for that to continue. Okay, so we will move on now, and so we'll go to Shavnil, who's going to let us know a little bit more about how to stand out from other job seekers. So once you've done the hard work, you've decided, right, I know what I'm going to target, and I know that I can look for a good salary and an increase on what I've either been on previously or market rates from years before. So once you've decided what to go after, Shavnil's got some tips on how to really stand out from the crowd and put your best foot forward. So let's go to Shavnil.
Thank you, Shannon. Even though it is a candidate short market at the moment, it doesn't always necessarily mean you'll be a shoe-in for that role that you want at the moment. If you're asking why that is, think of it this way. You went and saw the latest Marvel movie just last week. there was a scene in there that got you really excited. You told your mates and your friends and colleagues as well, and it got them excited too. So that's kind of the impression you want to start building when you do go ahead and meet the interviewer or the interviewee, and also in the application progress as well. So I've just got some top tips to help sort of grow that knowledge and that foundation around that. The first thing is like how to get your application to stand out from others, what to do after searching, after sending in your application, building connection during your interview, as well as communication is always key. Uh, we'll start off with how to get your application to stand out from others. Firstly, I would recommend doing some research on the company itself and going through the job description itself as well, just to see if there's any key links or transferable skills that you already have and you've acquired throughout your years and your other job experiences, and build your CV using those as a foundation, moving from there. And it doesn't always, when I say try to stand out from others, it doesn't always necessarily mean make your CV look pretty, as it may distract like the readers from what is important, which is the key skills that you want to bring to your next role. One thing I would recommend is using the funnel approach. So it is going ahead and saying, putting the key skills on top first, and then moving down from the funnel and putting all the other like sort of tasters or like the other bits, key juicy bits of information that might also help you to stand out as well. So after you've done that, you've sent it through, what do you do after that? So what you want to do after that is just go ahead and contact the recruiter or the employer. If they have a contact details given there, just say, hey, introduce yourself. Say, hey, I've gone ahead and applied for this role, but also have relevant questions to your application and to the role itself, so that can be answered. And it shows that you are interested in this role and you want to get a bit more information. And that sort of also opens it up a little bit towards like a screening process as well, and go from there. And it puts you on top of like the application part as well. So once you've done that, you send your application in, you've got in front of the recruiter or the employer. What's next is, once they're impressed with those key information that you've given, they'll want to interview you. In the interview, one of the major points that I would recommend is building the connection with with the interviewer, just so they are able, just so you can leave that impression. The best way I would say to build that connection is, we live in a social media age, so I would definitely recommend maybe stalking them on LinkedIn, just seeing what they've been up to, if there's any extra posts that they've been doing, seeing if there's any current market affairs or anything like that. And I would recommend looking at our P2P posts to see some current labor market affairs and challenges. That might be some good questions to ask while you guys are interviewing, and build that connection. And what you want to do is just try and also sort of bring that up, and so that way you've built that connection. Once you've done that, then when the employer or the interviewer does ask you, tell me about yourself, what you want to do over there is just go ahead and sort of give like a bit about your skills and the information that will be relevant to the job description or relevant to the role that you're applying for, and sort of pitch the idea of yourself to them. Once that's done, and the interview went smoothly, what's the next step from there is usually communication. What you can do after that is go ahead and speak to the interviewer, maybe connect with them on LinkedIn, or even just go ahead and follow them on LinkedIn. What tends to happen is, even if you are not successful for that role, there might be future roles that do come up, and you've already started building that relationship and the connection with them, and you'll be able to go ahead and move forward, and just be like, hey, we've already had this connection, let's try, and I'd be interested in this new role, and go from there as well. And the last thing I would recommend is if there's things or issues that have come up, or you've just accepted your dream offer or another different offer, just communicate that with the recruiter or the employer as quickly as possible, as what they would want to know is how things are going, and things like that. There's as what happens is, if it doesn't actually work out for that role, then you are not burning the bridges, and there could maybe be a potential to carry on with the process as well. So those are my top tips for you guys. All the best for your job hunting.
Shannon, you're muted.
Sorry about that. We'll just repeat all that again. Saying thank you so much for those great tips there, Shavneel. And also good to see some great comments coming through, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end of the webinar as well. All right, so let's move on to Julie again, who's going to tell us more about how to make that best first impression.
Awesome. Hi, Shannon. Thank you so much, Shannon and Cher, for obviously leading this webinar as well. I guess for me today, I'm going to talk and lead into the first impression across your body language. That includes eye contact through virtual and being on site. To start this off, you will know the common saying, it is often said you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And this is true, especially when you want to bring your whole self away from your CV. You are more than what's on paper. Your smile is your logo, your personality is your business card, and how you leave others feeling is you leaving your trademark. So it is crucial to start on the right foot. Whether you have an on-site or face-to-face interview, eye contact, your attire, and your body language all play a crucial part in making the first impression. So let's talk a little bit about being on-site. When you first walk through the door into the office, you may be greeted by a receptionist. What do you do in this instance? You introduce yourself and advise that you're here for example, a 10 o'clock interview with John. Not only are you stating why you are here, but you're also introducing yourself to receptionists. To save a bit of time, I would say have those conversations with reception, build your rapport while you're waiting to be called in for your first interview. In this instance, I would say that when you arrive on site, key things to look out for is avoid having a coffee in your hand. Less is more. Avoid bulk jackets, any coats, big bags, anything that will have to get you to go down and grab everything up when you're called in for your interview. If you can walk in just with yourself and your phone on airplane mode, that is the best. In terms of virtual interviews, cool thing is to remember is you have to be in a quiet space with no distractions. And this includes being your phone turned off or even on airplane mode. You need to make sure you have good internet connection, and it is okay before 5 minutes into the interview to do a test to make sure you have no connection issues. You are on the right virtual link, and that you are making sure that you are also not too early into an interview, but it showcases that you are prepared and ready to go. Now, when we talk about making the first impression, is that you need to make sure that you have a first firm handshake. And when we say a first firm handshake, it means that you're giving them a good impression that you are welcoming and that you are very open and interested in this role. This sets the tone for the interview. When we say professional attire, we're talking about head to toe. And the core reason around this is because, as funny as it seems, that people will notice what you're wearing. And that includes your shoes as well. So if you want to feel comfortable and be able to build that first impression, do look at the attire. And if you're not too sure what you're wearing is correct for the interview, talk to your friends, talk to your family, and get them to give you a bit of feedback and opinion. When we talk about on-site and virtual, we talk about eye contact. So at the moment, you will notice that a lot of the interviews are virtual due to our current COVID situations. So we need to keep in mind that we are staring at the camera and not at actual screen, because this avoids you trying to adjust your eye contact with the person that's interviewed, or potentially there's other people in the room as well. By making eye contact, it allows you to showcase that you're absorbing the information, as well as you're listening and understanding what is being asked. When we talk about nonverbal body language, this also plays a huge part. So we're talking about your posture, your hand gestures, and also, when you're in the room, it's about keeping your hands firmly on the table and your legs grounded. So I would say avoid crossing your legs. To add to that, when we talk about first impressions, is that you need to also understand that what is on your CV is very important on how you communicate to the people that are interviewing you. So when you need to explain that you have strong skill sets across X, Y, and Z, it is also crucial to make eye contact with everyone that is in the room. To lead from that, if we move away from body language, we need to also understand that when we are talking, we need to maintain that eye contact and also have that positive energy as well. It is also important to think before you speak. So when you're being asked a question, have a think about it. Rethink about in your head before you speak. This is important because you don't want it to be seen as you've practiced the script, that you know what is being asked, and that you're not rushing into any sort of question that is being asked. I guess when it comes to first impression, there's always going to be different judgments from different individuals that are interviewing you. So the key thing to remember is that you go in with a positive attitude. And like Shavnil said before, you need to prepare. It is crucial when we talk about preparation as well, that you know the location you're going to, that you're not too early, that you're well dressed, and that you are prepared for any ad hoc questions that are being asked. This showcases that you are well prepared, that you know the role that you're applying for, and that you have the passion and drive to join the company. Leading on from here, I guess, before I let my next colleague jump on to talk about her part, is that if you have any sort of questions or you're very nervous about going into an interview because you haven't interviewed for a while, talk to your friends. Talk to your maybe colleague that you have a good relationship with and get them to practice. Or if you like to be alone or you want to practice at home, stand in front of a mirror. And this showcases that in case you have sort of maybe facial expressions that may come up during interview, those are the good things to practice and tailor for your next interview. So that is all from me, and I hope that has helped.
Fantastic. Love those tips there, Julia. Particularly, I like that one about that your first impression starts as soon as you're on the premises. So you never know who's going to be in the lift with you. And the number of times that we or clients will ask the receptionist, what did you think of them, when they're excited about seeing a candidate. So you're on as soon as you step in the building, basically. But some fantastic tips to be able to show yourself in the best light. Okay, so now that we've got into the building, we've made those great first impressions, let's move on to Kirsty Hennigan, who's going to tell you more about preparing for the job interview.
Hello, thank you so much, guys. So I think this leads on quite nicely to what Julia and Shavnil have discussed. So as it's been mentioned, it is definitely a job seekers market at the moment, and we are in a position where clients need to be selling the position, while companies need to be selling the position to you, but you definitely still need to be putting your best foot forward. You may still be in competition with other candidates, so you definitely want to be making the best impression that you possibly can. So I just wanted to go through a few different stages of the interview process and just the best way to kind of prepare and how to run through some parts of your CV. And so the first thing is going through your work experience. In terms of this sector, I do think it's quite interesting because sometimes when we are speaking to candidates and interviewing candidates, they sometimes just explain, like, let's say for example, an executive assistant role, and you ask them what they do in their particular role. Sometimes it's a case of, oh, it's an executive assistant role, like I do minutes, I do diary management, I do travel arrangements, that kind of thing. What I would highlight here is, don't presume that your executive assistant role is the same as someone else's. You really want to highlight what those things looked like in your particular role. So you want to be able to paint the picture of what you did in your position and give specifics of what that looked like. How many people were you supporting with that? What did the minutes look like? How often did you have to do minutes? What was the turnaround in terms of that, the time? In terms of diary management, how complex was that? What was it you were looking after there? Travel arrangements, was it that you were doing international? Was it national? Did you have to do long trips? Was it short trips? Those kind of things. Did you have to work on any particular projects? So you really want to be highlighting what it was that you actually have done in your position, and really not presuming that because you have a particular title that everyone's going to know exactly what you were doing within your role. And this is the area where people are looking for those transferable skills and what you're going to be able to bring into your next position. In terms of, I think there was a question around this that has popped up in the chat, but if you do have gaps in your CV / reasons for leaving, then please just be honest around it. You've had to take time out. I think someone mentioned they have been made redundant and they found it quite difficult to get back into the workforce. What have you been doing in that time? Have you been expanding your knowledge? Have you been looking into getting a bit more experience in another area? Have you just taken some time out to work out what you actually want to do, and you're now ready to get back into the market? A lot of people are very, very understanding at the moment because we've all been through COVID, and COVID affected people very, very differently. So just be honest with the reason why you have had time out of your role, and why it is that you're now looking to get back into that position. If you do, we can read body language. So sometimes if you start trying to not be honest around things, it comes up as a bit of a red flag. So those things will start to be probed on. In terms of the next step, one of the main questions that people want to know is, why would you want to work for us? Why do you want to work for our company? And so the best prep that you can do for this is research the company. In terms of this side, I don't know whether anyone else was taught this way, but when I was interviewing, it was about going on the About Us page, reciting the history of a company, and then knowing that you had done your research so you could tell them that they had they started in 1990 and Dave and John started it up. So you really don't want to go into the history lesson and try and remember all the dates. It's more that you want to give a bit of a brief overview of what they do as a company to showcase that you actually know what their company does. And then when you were doing your research into their company, what was it that really excited you about them? So that might be, it's different for everyone, and please do have a look and see what it is that excites you. So don't just make up something, but it can be something along the lines of, oh, I noticed that you won an award for a client service, and that's something I'm really passionate about, and I really want to work for an organization that has a focus on that. Or it might be, I noticed that you do a lot of community work, and that's something I'm really passionate about. I do a lot of charity work outside of work. It might be that their values align with your values. It might just be that you've looked on their Instagram page, you see that they've got a great team dynamic, and they seem to do a lot within the people and culture aspect. And that's an organization that you want to be part of. So just anything that has showcased that you've done your research and it's specific to that company. You don't want to be going in and saying, oh, it's a healthcare company and I really want to work for a healthcare company, because there's another 200 companies out there that are healthcare companies that you could go and work for. So you want to make sure that you've showcased that you've actually done your research into that particular company, and these are the reasons why you want to work there. Moving on to the next slide is behavioural questions. So my top tip for this side is, please do not Google for the perfect answer. Google's not going to be able to provide you with the perfect script. Again, I know back in my day, I used to, how can I answer this question? How can I answer this? But in terms of behavioural questions, it's about using the STAR approach. So it's not a case of Google being able to provide you with answers, because it's about your personal experience. The reason why businesses are asking you these behavioural questions is they've asked you about your work experience, you've painted the picture of what you're doing, but now they want to get into the nitty-gritty bits of how you would deal with a certain situation and how those skills are going to be transferred across to the company when you're going to be put in similar situations in your new role. And so it's not to throw you up or to see how you handle under pressure. It really is just to find out a little bit more about you and your experience and how that's going to be transferred across. So the STAR approach is your situation. So you're describing the situation you were in. The task, so explain the task that you needed to complete. The action, so you're describing the specific actions that you took when you were completing that task. And then the result, so you're going to close with the result of what your efforts were. So I wanted to give you a bit of an example, just so that you kind of can get a bit of a gist of how it runs. And I thought I'd use one of everyone's favourite questions that they like to ask around, what are your strengths? So I think the habit that a lot of people tend to go for is the list. So they like to list off 3 or 4 strengths to showcase what it is that their strengths are, basically, which is great, but it doesn't actually showcase anything. You've just managed to throw out a couple of adjectives. I think that's the right word there. It also certain adjectives, everyone has their own perspective on what those mean. So you want to showcase what those mean to you. So I'll go through one. So what would you say your strengths are? So I would say I'm hardworking, I'm really results driven. So during COVID, we were working with a logistics company who had a really big increase in terms of their call volumes. So what they needed to do was they needed to get some staff on board to help out on the customer service front. So they needed 36 call center staff, and they needed them to start in 2 weeks' time. So what we did was we split it off in between 2 of us on the full-time aspect, and we were probably taking around about 50 calls a day from candidates. Between us, we interviewed about 50 candidates. For every single person that we got across the line for an interview, it was quite a stringent assessment process. There were the 3 stages to the interview. We prepped each candidate for every single stage of that interview so that they were feeling comfortable with the interview questions and also with the role play. And in terms of the results, we managed to get 24 people started the following week, and then we managed to get the further 12 people the week after. We did get feedback about what we did really well, but also what we needed to improve on for next time. And we implemented those for the next time that we had a recruitment drive with them. And we still work with them across the business when they do need to upscale. So that kind of just gives you a bit of an example of the way that you'd want to kind of word those answers and the way that you want to go about answering any behavioural questions. One of the things that I do just want to note that even if your result is a negative result, that's not a problem, but what you want to add on at the end is what you learn from that situation. So you want to be able to tell someone that, yeah, it wasn't the most positive outcome, but what we actually learned from that was the next time we did it, we did X, Y, Z, so that you're showcasing that you have learned from those situations and the mistakes that you've made in previous situations. One thing I want to mention around behavioural questions, they can come in many forms. So it might not be, can you tell me a time about this? Or can you tell me a time about that? So it can come in the form of, how would you deal with this situation? How would you work in a team? How do you work towards deadlines? And what you need to think of all of those questions is, can you tell me a time when you've had to deal with this situation? And that way you can instantly go in with examples. You, as Julie mentioned, you really don't want it to sound scripted, because sometimes when you've got a scripted answer there, it sounds scripted. So you go into robot mode and your personality is not coming across, and people buy from people. So they want to see that you're going to fit in their team and that they're going to get along with you and you're going to really add to the culture. And if you're in interview mode and you're in your script, you're really not showcasing any of your soft skills. So all I'd say is very similar to what Julia mentioned. Practice before you go into an interview, but just come up with stories around a couple of different things. a couple of different situations. So the best thing that you can do is have a look at a job description, have a look at the core competencies that they're looking for within that role, and then you could probably get an understanding of what kind of questions they're going to ask you in terms of the behavioural questions. So is teamwork a really big thing for this role? You're going to be working in a team quite a lot. So that way you can then think of an example of when you've had to work in a team previously. Okay, so it's going to have really strict deadlines. It's a project role. They're going to have deadlines and you're going to need to have a focus on that. When have you had to do that previously? There's a lot of multitasking. It's a really fast-paced environment and you need to jump from one thing to the next. When have I had to multitask previously? What was the situation? What was the task? What was the action? And what was the result? So yeah, so I think that's kind of my top tips around interview prep. I could probably go into so much more, but I got told I was only allowed 10 minutes. So I'll pass it over to Shannon.
Excellent. Well, it was an excellent 10 minutes there. Some fabulous tips, and you obviously come a long way since the days when you were first interviewing. So you've told us a lot of the things not to do, and I know that you obviously didn't do that with us because you've been with us for, 4 years now. I will add one more bonus tip to the behavioural questions because I do know that people find this a little bit tricky. So as Kirsty was saying, yes, have a look through the job description. Think about what are the things that are important, and you can try to anticipate some of the questions they're likely to ask or the key characteristics or strengths that they're likely to be interested in. But a good little trick is to, again, have some examples in mind. So think of either some big projects or things that you're really proud of. So were major achievements in your work history, because chances are when you're talking about something bigger like that, it can cover off a number of different strengths or qualities. So you'll be able to adapt that answer, or if you've got a few good examples, you can adapt to what they ask you. And the key things there, so yes, don't be scripted as much as you can, but it's also about that engagement, and you want to be able to do a really good job of helping the company or the interviewers to picture you within that role and within that business. So the more that you're able to engage with them, listen to what they're asking and respond, and as well as ask your own questions, the easier that is for them to picture you being successful in the role and working with them. Okay, so some fabulous little tips there from all three. Thank you so much, team. I'll go back through to some of the questions that we had. Let's just see. So I'll give this from a question from Brody back through to Kirsty. So she answered part of it, and she saw that pop up there. So Brody said, I haven't worked for the last few years after losing job due to layoff and lockdown. Do I need to include that in my CV, or should I leave it out? Kirsty, how would you approach that type of situation?
So yeah, definitely. So not worked in the last few years after losing job. I definitely include it. Even if it is a short period, you can just put underneath reason for leaving. So you can just say redundancies due to COVID. Even if it was a short period of time, it just explains where that gap was in your CV. You don't need to go into a lot of detail around the responsibilities if it was a short period. But if you're going through, we do go through your CV and we can see when the gaps are. So it's going to be a question anyway. So you are better off just explaining why you've not had a position during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Face things head on. And as Kirsty said earlier as well, going through COVID and dealing with the pandemic, if ever there's a good time to, I guess, for employers to be reasonable and understanding about any gaps and changes in situations, now is that time. So they're likely to be able to move on from there and it not be such a big hurdle. So yeah, it's just best to be upfront and honest. Okay, now we had one here. I'll take this one. from Jaya Kumar said, I need your help and support to find me a job, and looking at what our service costs. Now for candidates, feel free, so Jaya Kumar, feel free to get in touch with us after this. We'd love to hear from any candidates looking for work, and our services are free for candidates. So it's a completely free service, and we'll do what we can to be able to see if we can help you into work in Auckland. All right, what else do we have here? So Samantha said, in Shavneel's session, said to contact the recruiter or employer and to introduce yourself. She asked, if they're really busy though, won't this leave a negative impression? So I'll shoot that one back to you, Shavneel.
Thanks for your question, Samantha. In my experience, what I think happens is I understand a recruiter or employer would be busy, but what happens is when you get a phone call from a candidate, it might be just the candidate you're looking for. So it might be a good idea to actually maybe still have a chat with them, see what they're looking for, and it might stop your, I won't say necessarily stop your search from but it might also help out lighten that workload if you are kind of busy at the moment. But also what you can do is maybe just recommend, I know a lot of quite a few job ads at the moment are doing, please just send your CV in, or just giving a disclaimer about it, just saying, hey, we'd rather have the process through just sending your CV and information through rather than getting in contact over the phone with us as well.
Okay. Excellent. So yeah, it's really important to follow the instructions and whatever the process is. I think the important thing that Shavneel mentioned before as well is if you are calling through, and you wouldn't do it for every role, but if you're thinking, you know what, this looks exactly like me and I think they're going to be really interested in my application, and you want to put in that extra effort to make yourself be seen, then that's fair enough to call through. But you want to make sure that you have a reason to call, or that there's some relevance to that call. So not just a, hello, have you received my application? But you might highlight some of the strengths or reasons that you really wanted to put your application through, or think that you're going to be a top candidate. But particularly if you do have any questions that aren't already answered in the ad, that's what makes it worthwhile to the consultant or the employer as well. If they can see that you've actually listened to what's happening, followed the process, but if you have some relevant questions or some things to highlight, then it's worth having that conversation. Thanks, Shavneel. Okay, so this one will go to Julia. So talking about, Jasminda was talking about the commonness of virtual interviews at the moment. So wondering if they're likely to be the preferred way of meeting, and if you think it's better to interview virtually or in person. What do you think, Julia?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasminda, for asking me that question. I definitely would say this can go both ways. It really does come down, who you're talking to. Example, if you're working you're working with Frog Recruitment, I'm the sourcing specialist, and our client would like to say, hey, we'd love to meet the candidate in person. So in this case, our client is the driver. They've initiated that they want to meet you in person. In the conversation, then I will go back to you as a candidate and say, hey, Jasminda, would you be okay to meet our client on site at XYZ time and date? In terms of virtual, at the moment, you will understand with current COVID situations, a lot of people have the flexibility to work from home and also be in the office. So to put yourself forward, I would say nominate and let them know that you're free. For example, I'm free Wednesday between 10 and 2 p.m. Would this work for you? This will just push back to our client, and they will come back and say, yes, this will work. However, because this is the first virtual interview, are you okay to do this virtually? And then they will let you know that if you are successful, the next step would potentially to get you on site to meet the team and also to have a look what the office is like in terms of, where you park, what the team dynamic is, where everybody sits. So to answer your question, it can go both ways, but it's more having those comms with one, who you're talking to, and also who your client is and what they want us to do, and let our candidates know. I hope this has helped to answer your question.
Yeah, excellent. In terms of whether it's likely to be the norm going forward, I think it's Julia said, it definitely depends on the client. So there'll be some businesses who still have restrictions. They may not be fully back on site, but I know that the preference, if it is possible, is to see people face to face. But sometimes that's not either not possible due to their policies or just logistically with people away and hard to meet on site. And whether or not, as Julia said, whether or not to meet in person or virtually, it's about what's going to be better for you as well if you do have that option. So it's a great way to find out more about the business and get that feel for whether or not it's going to work out or be a good fit for you, as well as being able to have all those extra cues that you get in person from being able to meet with people face to face, read their body language and yours, so it can give you a better chance of impressing in person. Okay, and I think we've got very interested. So Nan's very interested in working in New Zealand, in Auckland. So if you want to get in touch with the team and send through your CV and details, that's great. We can take it from there. And lastly, we've got Julie, who asks, do we use photos and CVs, or is that a good idea? So I'll give that one to Kirsty.
I knew I was going to get this one. The famous photo CV question. It's an interesting one. I don't think there's any particular right or wrong answer within this. So in terms of having a photo on your CV, it can create sometimes, unfortunately, it can help because of the halo effect. So sometimes, depending on the photo, it can definitely get you in front of someone, but it can also bring in discrimination factors. So it's always a hard question to answer. I personally think no, but I know a lot of people like to have a photo on their CV, and it shows that they are quite professional, and it shows you in light of that particular role that you're applying to. So there's no right or wrong answer, I personally would say, but yeah, for me, I wouldn't put a photo on my CV.
Sorry, Kirsty, I shouldn't have landed with that one.
I know.
I
was
think
like,
that
no.
one of those another time. It was a bit mean of me. I think the key thing is that it's not expected unless your role, unless you're a model or something where your picture is part of your profile and is needed for the position. So it's not expected. That doesn't mean if you think it's going to improve your chances of getting a foot in the door or getting that interview, yeah, by all means go for it. But it's definitely not something that's required or is expected by recruiters or employers. Okay, last one here. So Lisa as well, looking at helping international applicants to find sponsored jobs. So at this stage, actually, funny timing, we're in the process of going through accreditation to be able to sponsor, but at this stage we're unable to. So we do look at candidates from overseas, but you would require working rights in New Zealand already at this stage, but watch this space. Okay, well, I think that is it for us today. Feel free, it's easy to get in touch with us, so if you do have any other questions or just want to reach out to the team, if you're looking for work in Tamaki Makaurau, feel free to reach out to Julia, Shavnil, Kirsty, myself, or any of the team at Frog in Auckland and Wellington, and we'll be happy to help or at least point you in the right direction. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're able to get some good tips to be able to help you secure the job you love. Ngā mihi nui. Thanks so much.